Hi, this is Brandon Steele. Welcome to the Mainsail Financial Group podcast series, where we host industry experts and local professionals to help share some guidance, some tips, some tricks into the things that we don't necessarily get a focus on day to day. Today we want to thank Evonne Noble for joining us to talk about family, finances, and money. Before we get into that though, Evonne, can you tell us a little bit about where we're at and why?
Yeah, we're in my office at Puget Psychotherapy, which is located in Madison Valley. We're a group of about 30 practitioners, so we consider ourselves a one-stop shop for any of your family needs for counseling and medication management as well.
Yeah, we just met down at Madison Kitchen actually, so we're going to record there, but it was a little tight, so we came back up here. But great coffee, great
bakery, great business, great people. Yeah.
So thanks for joining us today. Evonne is actually the owner and CEO of Puget Sound Psychotherapy, as she had shared. Their focus, and Evonne specifically, is really on individuals and families about finances, but a lot more as well. And so we're really excited to have you on today to talk a little bit about the difficulty with couples and money and all the challenges that come along with that.
Yeah, I mean, you can probably imagine, being in the field that you're in, they come to your desk for a different financial need than they come to mine. But almost all couples at some point have some financial challenge. And really, pretty much every year, when you get to taxes, when you get to saving or spending, every year most couples report having at least one big financial blowout, if not reporting that is the core issue that they deal with. I wouldn't say that's all couples, that money is their number one by any means, but money is security. Money represents so many different things to different people. Money is our dreams. Money is taking care of our children. So if any of our dreams, values, or ways we feel secure don't align, those conflicts come up when we're talking about how to spend their saved dollars.
Absolutely. And actually that's exactly where I want to start. So maybe if you can expand on that a little bit. Can you talk about how important these financial conversations are to a relationship just in general?
Yeah. So to zoom out, I think financial conversations are a lot like any other core conversation you're going to have with someone that you spend your life with, whether it's children or religion or what are our values. So I would consider money one of the pillars of values that the more you talk about in advance as you move towards maybe a commitment or a really long forever ever life with someone, the more you talk about that in advance, the more you can prevent some of those problems, or at least know your areas of struggle where you have difference. I'd say in general, when people have differences, we don't often know how to deal with that. So if you come from a culture and a family that is very focused on saving, that is security, that is being responsible, you've got that Puritan work ethic, and maybe I come from a family that's in a different class, that money's been abundant, we've got money sitting in the bank making money, spending is a way to be active in the community, a way to be philanthropic. All of a sudden those two worldviews that might seem interesting because they're different can become emotionally challenging when we have those differences. So I find that when I'm working with couples, those financial conversations haven't happened in the beginning, and they come up when they're in crisis. And maybe even when they've avoided the crisis, they've put it to the side, they've tried to get through those conversations, maybe one of them's given up a little bit, and usually by the time they come to me, unfortunately, it's when things have gotten pretty hot.
So in that situation, because I think you're spot on, the reason a lot of these things come up is because of the different backgrounds and how we were raised around money. So when you run into that situation, how can couples kind of work through some of those challenges? What are some great ways to find out where those similarities and differences are?
Well, I think it starts with knowing yourself. So it's sort of like doing an inventory. What are my beliefs about money? What did my family teach me explicitly or implicitly through our culture? What experiences have I had around money? If you've gone through anything traumatic, homelessness or losing financial resources or any kind of financial devastation, it really can create some financial trauma. And if I know what my financial fears are, my financial values are, what my dreams are for the future, and I kind of call it your money mindset, that's informed by your family, informed by what you want and what you're dreaming for, that kind of gives you a sense of how to start to talk to somebody else. But if you don't know where you're coming from, unfortunately, then you're just in a reactive cycle. And that's one of the things I help couples with, is look at the cycle that they get stuck in. And what I mostly do is first do what you're asking. How do I help them and how do they prevent that? I start to get clear what are my values, needs, and fears? Because if I can just share them from a place of ownership, I'm not in a reality battle with you about the right way to do things. I can just say, wow, for me, having X amount in the savings in the bank is what's really going to create a sense of comfort to do the dreams you just talked about.
Sure.
Yeah, and there's less to battle around when you're clear and coming from a compassionate place. So I'd say, one is know yourself. Number two is money, more than anything, seems to put people in an adversarial position.
Sure.
Us against each other, or our ideas are in competition, versus an us, tackling the shared problem. So if I think that I'm right, or if I feel like your ideas are somehow a threat, that adversarial position makes it really hard to listen, really hard to be compassionate.
Playing defense.
Yeah, the defense. So rather than because offense is still defense, right? Rather than those two positions, which is usually criticize or defend, I try to help people think about, how do you want your partner to feel after you talk about money? After this conversation, or the one you're planning to about retirement or about college savings, how do you want them to walk away feeling? Because often the power differential that comes in, if one person earns more, comes from more money, any other disparity, maybe someone lost their job, that the person in the higher power position sometimes doesn't even realize how aggressive they can be. And that's even more important, to have that compassionate lens and that sense of us. How do I want us to feel when we talk about money?
Okay. Yeah, and actually I was going to go there as well. So it sounds like when you have that situation, I think a lot of people, to your point, don't recognize when that's happening. And so it sounds like stepping back and really just asking yourself that question, how do I want my partner to feel from this conversation, is how you would suggest getting through that. Absolutely.
And being intentional. If money is easy to talk about, this obviously doesn't apply to them. But if it is, and it is for most people, just like any hard topic, I recommend you plan a time where you're not distracted, you're not dealing with kids or calls from work. You prepare for that meeting. You think about what's my personal goal for the meeting, both content, agenda, but equally as important, how do I want the other person to feel about what we're doing?
Sure.
And then have a time constraint, because that can be dangerous when things just kind of loop out of control. And then at the end of the meeting, having a plan for, if it's a temporary compromise we're making to try something, when are we going to come back to it and address this again? Because these aren't usually discrete one-time conversations.
Sure. Yeah. And so how often would you suggest that those meetings are held? Do you have
the biggest one I'd say is anything, again, the before is better. So prevention is going to save everyone a ton of problems. So if you're moving towards commitment, any stage, gosh, we're becoming exclusive as a couple. How do we even spend money on dates? Who pays for what? How do we deal with that? We're going to go on a trip together. Oh, now we're moving in, or we're getting married. So those preventative big picture conversations are ideal.
Sure.
And then otherwise, let's imagine you've had those, or you've gotten through some hard times. You can think about things like we do financially. You can think about things in quarters, and also monthly and annually. So you might think annually, where are we going on a bigger picture conversation? Quarterly, are we trending in the way we thought we would, or do we need to course correct a little? And then monthly, hopefully someone is, or both people are doing the more hands on the ground checking of the numbers. Are we spending within our budget? Are we moving towards our goals?
Sure.
So I think having those cyclical patterns, at least once a month, at least every quarter, absolutely every year, can be a way to stay ahead of things or on top of things.
Okay. Yeah, to me as a financial advisor, that works very well.
I would say probably aligns with
makes sense.
how you do things too.
So I guess along those lines, you brought up earlier that a lot of times you'll see one person in a little bit more of like a power position, or somebody who takes that on a little bit more. That's usually the case, is that there is one out of a couple that takes on more of the financial.
Well, I guess there's two types of power positions. One is who does what, and who knows what, because having an imbalance in financial knowledge is the number one reason I see couples. One person knows a little more, is a little more excited, and then that's great for the other person who's less knowledgeable or less excited. But over time, that other partner can become disenfranchised, fearful, avoidant, and then this person can either become resentful or more righteous that this is the way to do things. The second way I see power differentials is where there just truly is more money, like one person lost their job, maybe they decided to have one person stay home with the children. So how we value in our culture home labor versus dollars that come in is a really important conversation for people to have. And if you're on the end where you've got the bigger dollars attached to your paycheck, unconsciously we bring privilege to that position. And I've been guilty of that myself, where, oh, well, if I'm making this, then I certainly have a say in this, and all of a sudden I become that voice of righteousness rather than, oh, how's that going to make you feel that I'm talking about this like that?
Yep, that makes sense.
That's not a very we attitude.
Yeah, well, and as an advisor, again, like I've seen that time and time again. So we really strive to make sure that we're asking the other spouse, like over and over again, the same questions that we're asking the one that's answering more directly.
I bet, because someone probably just steps in, right, into those meetings.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So with couples and how they handle money, do you have any suggestions, like more, where am I going? Like more strategically on how they can kind of help to be a whole, but also create some sort of like independence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, different couples handle that differently. There's kind of two common models. One is the everything is shared model, and we align our goals around what comes in, whoever is bringing in whatever that looks like, and we allocate buckets out of that. And it's usually helpful to have some, couples that have a lot of abundance don't always have to make as many of these decisions. So not only does there come some fortune with that flexibility in terms of options in life, but also within the relationship, there's less dollars that are being as tightly managed. But most people are managing dollars to some degree, and most people want some degree of freedom and autonomy. So if you're doing the us model, where everything comes into a one master account, and we've allocated this for our mortgage, and this for pets, and this for trips, and this for our rainy day fund, how much each person spends on hobbies or luxury items can become, as you probably have seen,
a bit of
a place of contention. Someone points out someone's spending habits. Well, I buy this, but you buy that.
Right.
So I think when you can have a discretionary fund, that gives people some freedom and just have a sense of I can spend what I want. Another way people will do it is have a cap. Like if it's below X amount of dollars, we each have the autonomy to make those decisions. If it's above that amount, we'll consult with each other.
Okay.
The other model that can work for people is the two separate buckets model, where people, and this usually only works for two income families or a one income family where they've decided to allocate maybe like allowances. And so in those models, people pay into whatever is the agreed shared, but the default is separate. So then you're agreeing to paying for rent or housing, paying for utilities. Oh, we're going to share these saving costs. Oh, we're going to share this money for the children. So it's sort of the inverse. Then they're agreeing to what's a shared expense, and then they usually move that into a shared account. And then everything else is mine. And if there's imbalance there, oh, you want to do an expensive trip, but I don't have that kind of discretionary income, then that becomes an our decision again. And I don't know if you've seen that kind of pattern. And I've heard different things, of course, from different people. And I'm wondering if you see a trend in if one of those models you think creates more problems than the other.
I'll go the happier route. Okay. I'll say I think the one that I've seen firsthand anyways that has worked the best has been the communal bucket, right? So all the stuff that they handle is paid through that. And then almost like the allowance version that you were talking about for the luxuries and whatever. So they'll cap, I'm just making up numbers, $1,000 each a month that they can spend on whatever the heck they want. Nobody's checking each other's anything. Everything else goes communal bucket, and that's how they make the family decisions. So I've seen that work really, really
That makes a lot of sense to me. Again, everyone has different values of what ours means and mine means. But even with an us mentality, most of us want some autonomy. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this comes back to what we were talking about earlier, where it's like there's certain things that I think need to be discussed as a family, but there is going to be somebody who takes a little more control, and so how much detail do you really need to touch on? And I guess I'll actually ask that to you. You go back to the monthly, quarterly, annual. How much detail do you recommend they actually dig in?
So I'm going to equivocate. On one hand, I think that the more people know about money, it's a way to know what security you have. and eventually not knowing usually creates problems. I also am very phenomenological. I really respect if somebody's value is, I trust my partner implicitly, I don't want to, it's such a gift to not be involved, that is so stressful for me. What I usually do is ask people I learn more about what need that meets for them. Oh, it's stressful, it's scary, I have math trauma. It's just something I like. Would you make me go back to school to learn math? Would you make me learn to drive stick shift? No, but what are the consequences?
Sure.
So let's just go with a driving metaphor. You don't want to drive, no problem, but then you might be limited in where you can go. You don't want to learn how the money is being budgeted or spent or what accounts you have. Okay, let's look at some of the problems that might come up down the road. And I feel like that's my job, is learning what people's needs are. So the need is, I don't want to be overwhelmed. And their way of trying to meet that need sometimes creates problems they don't anticipate.
Sure.
So helping them look at those potential trade-offs can sometimes say, oh, maybe there's a different way to meet my need not to be overwhelmed, but I don't want to deal with if we ever get to a place where, 50% of couples divorce, where I'm in a powerless position, we're ending this relationship and I have no clue what money is there.
Sure.
Or not uncommon, I'll deal with people at the retirement stage of life. And one person will have managed the money and the other person has no idea what's okay to spend. And you've probably seen this too, that chapter where one person doesn't realize they have millions of dollars because they've been living frugally to get the millions of dollars, right?
Yep.
So I like trying to help people look at the trade-off and make, maybe by coming to us in different ways, our different roles, make more informed choices.
Yeah. So I swear you're like reading like into the next chapter each time. You're just leading me right down the next question. So in the event of death or divorce, right? If there is a spouse that maybe doesn't know the ins and outs or isn't as familiar as they maybe should be for some of that stuff, well, like how do you start? Where do you typically recommend they start to pick up some of those skills?
Yeah. So if they know something's coming, and that's a nice thing, just like estate planning and will planning is so important. It's a gift to everyone you love to have your affairs in order or your wishes known. If preemptive is best when possible. So if you know the relationship's heading towards an end and you can work amicably towards talking about those things. I mean, the divorce process will force you to itemize them anyways. So if you can do it in like a let's care for each other with a compassionate ending, that's a nice way to, just for the person who's less informed, know, oh, here's the accounts that we have. What will be going with you or with me? Or, oh, my spouse might be dying. What are our accounts and what were they set up for? So first it's just a broad view of like what's out there. A lot of people don't even know the difference of different types of investment accounts and you're probably educating them a lot on that to help them understand the different tax implications, or what's available to them is like cash on hand now versus something that they pulled from a certain retirement fund would have certain penalties. So overview of what the accounts are. Then 2, what's their new budget? For someone who is going to be surviving a spouse, their budget often increases beyond what they know what to do with, or at least they have more options.
Sure.
If that's a later life stage, again, when people who come to us are probably in a more privileged, advantaged position to be having money to manage. Certainly, a loss of a spouse could mean devastation for a family at an earlier stage of life. They don't have life insurance. There's no income. So I don't think that demographic doesn't probably come to you or I quite as often. I think money is a privilege that gets you into more services to then do better by money. So I just want to acknowledge we're talking about a certain segment of society.
Thanks for clarifying that.
But with the law, if you're dealing with all of a sudden I'm, a widow, which is because of gender death actuarial statistics, most common. I think having someone by your side. So I often will refer people as they come to me for financial coaching. I'll refer them to, if they can afford it, to someone like yourself, or to another type of advisor that can help them plan long term. Especially if they want to stay in that less, I don't want to have to manage it myself position. It's like, well, then let's get a professional that has good fiduciary responsibility to help care for you. But I'd say more often people tend to want to step into that because they realize how vulnerable they were by not knowing.
That makes sense. Do you often find that the less known parts are the details or the bigger picture. Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yep, I do. I think that the bigger picture people often talk about, but in such vagary that they think they're talking about the same thing, and then they get into conflict.
Okay.
So, we were talking about saving for a house, but we didn't talk about exactly how much. We knew we wanted money for retirement, but I didn't know. I mean, honestly, a fight I've been witness to is, I didn't know you were saving that much. You know, someone's been living in an austerity regime, feeling purposeful, but thinking, this is ridiculous. So the big picture things people seem like they've talked about, but not, and I imagine you see this, not where they've actually gotten a clear plan together, and they really need help from a professional to sometimes do that.
Yeah.
I think if I had to pick one area to learn, the details, because that's the day-to-day choices and management.
Sure.
And that's where I'm really excited to be able to refer people to your online classes.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that when people come to me, they need more help, those who are trying to get educated on just basic skills and literacy. So what you're going to offer, I think, is really needed.
Yeah, we're excited to launch that for sure.
Yeah.
It's quick, so excited to get it going. To kind of like start to wrap up here, I want to back up like very, very broadly and just ask you a very actionable item. What is something that couples who are just trying to work through this, trying to make sure they're on the same page, what's something that they can take away and implement like right out of the gate?
My guess is almost everyone who's listening has not had a financial meeting, or maybe not. Maybe your demographic is really on top of it and they have regular meetings. But I'd say plan a financial meeting. Make an agenda for that meeting. What are the things that you feel like you both know and agree on, and confirm that that's true? And what are the things you haven't talked about? Whether it's, now we're getting ready to have a child. Let's plan for that financially. We're moving towards slowing down towards retirement. Let's talk about that. So putting that meeting on the calendar, getting the agenda there, and going into it with that mindset of how do I want the other person to feel?
Yeah.
And maybe the first meeting, not even having a goal of any action. That if the meeting's goal is just to understand the other person, understanding precedes all good action. And it could also prevent the battle for what to do to come up. The longer people stay, and this is honestly what the majority of what I help people do, even around dollars, is stay longer in listening and understanding.
Okay.
So if I told them one thing, do that meeting well.
I like that.
Go in with listening, understanding, and empathy.
Yeah, I think that's really good. We've seen even people come into our office for a meeting and request, not at our request, their request, that it's just the spouse, just the husband, just the wife, whoever. And unfortunately, I think what it leads to is what you're talking about, where it really starts to spread wider and wider, that discrepancy between the two spouses' knowledge. So I think coming back to that, whether it's with somebody like us on their own, whatever, just doing it.
Just doing it. Exactly. Page. Make the appointment, do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. So if anybody has any questions for you, what's a good way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, they're welcome to reach out to me directly at EvonneNoble.com, which is EVONNENOBLE.com.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I think this is really good stuff in there.
People need this. We need financial literacy earlier in school. We need it around these key moments, around relationships. So it's a great opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again.
Yeah.
And thank you all for joining us today. We hope you found something helpful. As always, if you have any questions for us, you can email us directly, info@mainsailfg.com.